science student at Bowling Green State University. I'm in my senior year, and throughout my time at Bowling Green State, I've worked on my own video game concept. So the reason I chose to do this talk was because our video game actually is planning on integrating with a heart rate monitor, so I thought it'd be kind of interesting to share with everybody how you could maybe use heart rate monitors or facial recognition in your games. So those are the two main things we're going to focus on today, although biometrics does encompass a wide range of things. And I think I said it when most of the people were in this room, but like the way this talk's going to work is basically like I'm going to talk for about 20, 25 minutes, and then there's going to be about 15 minutes for questions at the end. So let's get started. So first off, a little bit more about what this talk is about. I'm sure some of you have an idea what biometrics are, but for those that don't, it's the measurement and analysis of unique physical or behavioral characteristics. And like I said before, it includes heart rate and facial expressions, but also includes things like blood pressure, fingerprints, and tone of voice and vocal patterns, which unfortunately in 45 minutes we're not going to be able to focus on all of them, but I'm going to do my best to focus in depth on heart rate and facial expressions. And so for each of those, we're going to examine how you would integrate it into a game, like what you could use it for, the benefits to doing so, and the potential problems, and if there are any countermeasures to those problems, I'll mention what I thought of for those. So we're going to start with facial recognition. So some ideas of how you could use facial recognition to enhance player engagement and stuff in your game would be you could use it for analysis of the player's mood. And it could maybe determine something like the NPC's dialogue response could change based on if the player was angry or neutral or whatever. Another option I thought of was you could increase or decrease certain statistics on the player character in the game based on mood. So like an example of this would be something like if the player was happy, you could increase their vitality or their determination. If they're like really getting into the game, would increase their stamina. Or if they're like really confused about how to solve a puzzle, that might decrease their intelligence or something. Then these are all like corresponding to different stats you might have in your game. As well as you could have some events more likely to happen under a certain mood, and some actions might only be available under a certain mood. And these are just 4 examples that I thought of how this facial recognition could be used in a game. So then the question becomes, how do you integrate this in with your development? Well, due to the need to analyze like facial data captured from a webcam in near real time, and normally how it works is you would have to have either your own database or be analyzing it online against like an API. It would work best with games that have an online backend already, or are planning on integrating an online backend. And in my opinion, the genres it would work best with are genres that basically would elicit visible facial emotions in players. You just got to think, you're staring at the screen, you're not always going to have a large range of facial expressions. So some genres I thought of as an example would be like mystery, horror, and survival, although it could work with anything, but those would elicit stuff like confusion, fear, and determination in the player. There are facial recognition SDKs out there right now that can be integrated in games, such as Kairos and Aftex, and I know Unity was here yesterday. I have worked in Unity a bit, and Aftex is one that works with Unity. Kairos, I think, is like a standalone API, and you can use it in Unity or Unreal or whatever you choose to. The problem with the APIs then becomes that currently the SDKs can only accurately identify like 5 or 6 basic emotions. So, like for example, if you pick Kairos, they advertise being able to identify joy, anger, disgust, sadness, fear, and surprise. And the way that these would work if you're developing with them would basically be like, it would analyze, like I said, the player's face, and it would return a percentage or a float value for each of the emotions that it can recognize as it's analyzing each face. So anyway, to reasonably implement a system based off this, it requires extra effort. The developers would have to have a range of acceptance values for each outcome that they wish to implement, and also have an outcome if none of the acceptance criteria are met. The player would also have to have access to a webcam and have a decent internet connection, because like I said, you're going to be streaming their facial emotions against the recognition API or against your own database. So let's see an example. So basically, I took the first example I had, which was talking to an NPC and having them grant you a quest. And so here, it takes the form of a table. This is like basically if, and then what do I do? And it says at the bottom, it's kind of small, but basically A and B are the float values that are returned from the SDK. And they would normally, like I said, be translated to a percentage, so they'll probably be between 0 and 100. So this is just like a hypothetical situation you could implement with talking to an NPC, where say joy is greater than A and surprise is less than B, you grant the first quest. Any of the second two conditions, you would grant the second quest, or there's a fourth condition and you grant no quest. And obviously this becomes more complex if you want to work in more emotions than 2 at a time, which is why I, in the previous slide, suggested having a condition if none are met. And on the right here, this is a diagram I pulled from some IEEE research. They basically did a research on if you could reasonably implement what I'm talking about, a facial recognition system in real time in a game. But they also did stuff with voice feedbacking, like if you were talking on Discord and stuff in the game as well, or in your favorite gaming communication app. They also have in this diagram how that would work. So I thought that was a pretty interesting, I guess, addition that maybe somebody could focus more research on. Like in the first slide I mentioned vocal patterns are an interesting aspect of biometrics, so somebody could do further research there as well. So like I said, there's some benefits and obviously a lot of countermeasures to the facial recognition as it stands right now. The benefits that I've run through right now, basically you have an opportunity for enhanced engagement with your players and dynamic events and response and storytelling. But as I've touched on, every player needing to use the system must have good internet, which is a problem because not everybody does. So what I could think of for a countermeasure for that was to make the system optional, like to have an alternate system for a slow connection where maybe you're just taking like a picture every 10 seconds of the person or something. The second setback was that every player using the system must have a webcam. This I don't think is such a big deal because I feel like every modern laptop has a webcam. I mostly think it'd be a big deal for people with desktops. But then again, those are pretty cheap these days, so I mean, and maybe you could like sell a cheap webcam when you're selling your game or something. But the last one, there's not really a countermeasure. It requires a lot more development effort. And there's not really a way around that as it stands. You have to integrate, you have to do branching storylines if you're gonna do dynamic quests, like I said, or it's just more development effort. And I think that's why we're not seeing it in more games right now, is it's not really super feasible with the amount of like resources most teams have right now. So then the question becomes, is heart rate monitoring any better? And I think the conclusion we're going to come to at the end is that it is, but let me convince you. So the first thing, these are actually figures that I made while working with my game. But so how would a heart rate monitor be integrated with a game? Well, there's actually 4 ways, and 2 of them are pictured here. So it's kind of like a spectrum. You can have a bridge to the computer, like such as an Arduino. That's what we're using for testing. But basically your heart rate monitor on your wrist or whatever would communicate to the bridge, which is plugged into the PC. So it kind of makes it easier in some of the development to get that direct line. You can also do it without the bridge, which kind of opens up some tougher development, because if you're using Bluetooth LE, there's not a really easy way. It doesn't have some of the features that Bluetooth had, but you could maybe make it work. And for both of those scenarios, there's also the option to use them in an online or an offline game. So this is already more versatile because you can use it in online and offline games. So basically the left one is with a bridge, such as the Arduino, doing in an online atmosphere. The right one is a non-bridge direct connection between the heart rate monitor and the gaming device. And also offline. So what I'm saying is you could have 2 more combinations that aren't pictured here. But these are the ends of the spectrum. So like with the emotion recognition, we need to talk about accuracy of the heart rate monitors. Like I said, they can be used in online or offline games, so it's already an improvement. But the accuracy in game is constrained by both the gaming device, so like your PC or your PlayStation, and the heart rate monitor, and the bridge if applicable, which is probably why in the end it's better to not have that. So you need a gaming device that supports Bluetooth or Bluetooth LE, excuse me, a heart rate monitor transmitting in near real time, as well as the ability to access the data in near real time. So like a good example of a heart rate monitor that can do this is like we're using for testing the Mio line of products. They are pretty cheap. They're, well, as far as heart rate monitors go, they're like $60. And they basically, they can transmit the data in real time, and you have the ability with their API to access it in real time. A poor example is the Fitbit line of products. Technically, they transmit in real time, but their API can only pull updates, I think, like every 10 to 30 seconds, unless you're using their app, which is not really useful if you're building your own app. And I know that you can maybe like do some custom work with this, and I think it's being researched, and I only know this because one of my professors at school has, like, his research is with Fitbits and like being able to pull the data in real time in not their app, but I don't know if it actually works or not yet. So yeah, there's different setbacks with that. If using the bridge, you also have to keep in mind, like, the point of using one would be to make it easier to translate data between the heart rate monitor and your game. So that's the general idea behind using an Arduino or something that plugs into the computer. But it still has to have at least Bluetooth functionality to communicate with your wristband. So this is probably all really confusing. So I'm going to just give you an example from our game prototype. It's like a proof of concept. I have no idea how loud this is going to be. So I might have to turn it down. But it's basically going to show you that you can pull the online data, or you can pull data from the heart rate monitor into an online game. And we are using the bridge in this implementation. So here we go. This is going to be about a minute long. I hope it's not too loud. That was actually really quiet. So anyway, this is, on the left here you got the game and the output, and then further along in the video you'll see I also am taping on my wrist that it's actually capturing the values without putting below and on the screen. And when it's not, like when it's pulling 0 and it's in between capturing a value, you'll see that I actually have implemented an algorithm that's simulating a normal heart rate. But yeah, this is all online. I had to log in to get into this, as you saw. So you see it's pulling 88, 90, 90, 90, 89, 89, 89. So it's basically just a proof of concept to show you that this is possible in a game. And I think it takes a lot less effort than the facial recognition, because you're not also needing people to have like a great internet connection per se. Like you could use this in an offline game, although this one is online. So then we're going to talk about the benefits and the setbacks and the countermeasures for the heart rate monitor implementation. So again, you got the dynamic events and responses, and storytelling are a big plus. You can do things with engaging players via storytelling better, and just in general engaging players more. You also have a potential for an increase in player control over breathing patterns and awareness of heart rate patterns, which I think is a good thing, since a lot of people's heart rates probably spike during video game play, like when you're fighting a boss or whatever. You probably not great for your heart rate in the long term, or your heart. So there's that, and the other plus is it can be used online and offline. And again, similar setbacks. Every player needing to use the system has to have a heart rate monitor. So you could, to bring the cost down, you could manufacture your own, you could use low-cost proprietary ones, or you could sell them with your game. And the second one's a little different. I think the system can be abused if implemented poorly. Like somebody could reasonably drink 10 Red Bulls and say, oh, my heart rate's gonna be like 30 beats per minute higher, and so I'm gonna get like a boost to this statistic or whatever. And that's not how the system's meant to be used. So the countermeasures I could think of to combat that would be to take a starting heart rate and implement the algorithm based off increases and decreases. So that means like if you started at 90 and you went up 30, well maybe that you reached above a ceiling and that's now like bad for you. So that leads me to my second point, which is you can include a floor and a ceiling. So like don't go up more than 10 points or down more than 10 points from your starting heart rate, and you'll be in the good zone. And I think that might help even out the system. But again, you have the problem that it still requires more development effort. Not as much as integrating with the online facial recognition, but still quite a bit more. Like, it would not have taken me as long to make that prototype or proof of concept if I had done it without, heart rate integrated into it. And so some people might be wondering, like, does it even really work? Like I said before, like, does your heart rate even go up, like, when you're playing video games? Well, yes, it does. Video games can evoke the fight or flight mechanism and raise heart rate. This is basically the steps a student researcher took to see if heart rate increased with a frightening event in a game. And so I'll let you read that real quick. And so basically they were asked to play a scary game, and they, before playing it, were allowed to take a resting heart rate, and then were asked to play it, and then as soon as the scary event happened, they took their heart rate again. So these were the results they got. On the left in the dark blue is the beginning heart rate before the scary event. The right is the one after the scary event, and on the red is the change in heart rate. And as you can see, nearly everybody went up by at least 1 and up to 9 beats per minute. So in closing, I think this is a lot more implementable in a game as the technology stands right now. And I think that facial recognition also poses a great opportunity, but maybe is a little, needs to advance a little more for the technology to be usable. And I think there could be more research done into the voice feedbacking system. I'd be interested to see somebody like implement that, and like how people's voices or tone of voice change in similar ways to what I've shown here. And so these are my works cited, and thanks for listening, and we're gonna see if anybody has questions. He has a question.
What about Connect and PS4i? They have built-in SDKs that are free for recognition.
Okay, and what about them?
Well,
Like,
have you thought about using those instead of just going to an online service?
for the facial recognition, or the?
Yes, for facial and full body recognition.
I have not. No, that's a good point.
And I believe the original Connect's only like probably 80 or 50 bucks.
Yeah, I have looked into the original Connect, and
the second one's even better because it has its own dedicated full hardware for actually doing all the precise measurements of your body movement.
yeah, I guess that's something I was more targeting, like PC architecture in
You
this.
can use it on PC.
Yeah, but that's a good point. I like your point there. Yes, sir.
So with the video game and implementing your heart rate into it, are you looking for more of like a positive feedback or negative? So if their heart rate's starting to spike, do you increase the volume, or do you turn it down to like bring them down to a normal level?
So the
Like,
way
what's the
that
ultimate goal, I guess?
the way that
heart rate?
in my game we're planning on using it is it's gonna be an online MMO eventually. So I'm planning on using the heart rate to determine if they're playing the right class for them, basically. So if you have a high heart rate and it's spiking a lot, and you're playing a warrior, you might get a buff because basically, like, that's how that class is meant to be played. They thrive off adrenaline. But if you have a pretty static heart rate and are kind of undeterred by scary events, and you're playing a mage, you would also get a buff because that's how that class is meant to be played. They're tranquility based. So that was my idea. And you have another question.
So I have lots of questions.
Go ahead.
So if you're going to do heart rate for that, are you going to continually monitor in case they just come into the game pissed off already because they're not already going to be elevated? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where the thing that I mentioned at the end, where you're gonna like take a starting one when they come into the game and like do like increases and decreases, because like if they come in and they're like already pissed off, but we're like doing a 10 over and 10 under, like it's not gonna be any different. But somebody comes in and is at 60 and 10 over and 10 under.
Also brings up the question, they already going to generate stuff that's very personal information.
We have these gaming consoles, we have Alexa, we have things like that, and they're now researching like HIPAA
Okay.
and criminal proceedings. Has that discussion happened? Just curious.
No, it has not. But I think that it has been touched on in a way. I think that we kind of determined we're not going to store the heart rate on a database. It's just going to be like used in an algorithm in the game, and It's not really going to be something that's going to take part in multiplayer atmospheres in the game. It's more to like up your character's power, like I said. Yes.
Well, him first.
Oh yeah, sorry. You.
One thing I was curious about, you talked about like the impact of taking the biometrics into the game, but what about when you have character traits that are actually, like the example you showed, a person running? Well, the person playing the game is sitting in a chair. So if the heart rate goes up because the character is doing something, it's the artificial character. And then you have the impact of the physical character, the person playing it, that's impacting also the stats. So you got a fusion of data that's coming from two different directions. Have you considered about the balance between that to make it realistic so that you see something happen, the heart rate goes up,
Mm-hmm.
and the person just ran 10 miles, but your heart rate's normal. Then all of a sudden a rock jumps behind you, and the person playing the games gets alerted, it's like, hey, that surprised me, and the heart rate goes up. It doesn't make sense now. So are you considering the balance between the artificial and the physical environment, how they work together?
I think that's something that we need to do more research into
Okay.
because it's definitely tough to like account for every situation. Like you don't know what's going on in somebody's home, or if they're got a quiet atmosphere where they're playing, or if their cat's like crawling up their leg, or you know, like and definitely like we don't want to have it like spike because in the game, and also spike because it's something in the physical atmosphere. So I think that's somewhere that more research could also be done. Yes.
Yeah, so a couple things. One on the HIPAA, as long as your data is anonymous, you should be fine, but your university probably should have you do an IRB. But the one I was kind of curious is on the heart rate data for the maze, the scare,
Yeah.
is that a brief event or is it systemic, and or do they maybe know how much the heart rate went up just from trying to solve the maze or whatever the game was?
I believe how that game works is it's literally like a simple, like you go through the maze game and then like a scary
Slender
figure
Man
just
type?
like pops up, yeah,
Okay.
out of nowhere. So it's not like a hard game,
Okay.
and it's just like something jump scares you.
Yeah, because I'm
does
curious
that-
whether my heart rate would go up on a jump scare because it's
Well,
such a
it's-
brief event.
Yeah, one person's you can see on the person two it went down, so.
Well, yeah,
that's
so
kind of
my
the
question
outlier.
is just the act of doing something cognitive going to increase your heart rate by,
That's another
5
area
beats,
I
you
think
know.
that they could research too. Like, does just solving a puzzle or like
Yeah.
playing a game just increase your heart rate without the fear at all? That's a good point.
was your third reference there the one with the stress tensors on the face?
Which
Is that the paper? I know they,
I don't know.
I think that was the Japanese, they were looking at stress tensors on your face. And,
It's the emotion diagnosis of video game players from their facial expressions and their
Okay.
application to voice feedbacking.
and a third comment I'll make, for the facial recognition, in facial animation, there's 26 points that define your face.
Mm-hmm.
That would not be a lot of data to ship across the network. But it would require computational power on your machine to analyze the video.
What I'm wondering is like if you had to analyze, well, I guess with the 26 points, that's not a lot. But if you had to like analyze the whole picture against the database, that's kind of what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
So they're not gonna have a mocap rate on their face.
No, but yeah, there's,
That's why if you use something like Connect that builds a
I
full.
don't think Connect
Yeah.
can do facial recognition.
Yeah.
It just does
I
like
over.
software.
I have no idea what it's like. You have to
To my knowledge, it only can do like software. Yeah, both of them.
Go ahead with your question when you're ready.
Yeah, so my other question was, have you thought about using this research for exercise games?
I
Because that
did
would benefit
because
a lot.
yeah, I did actually because like I remember having a Wii growing up and like I loved playing like those sorts of games because it's a way to game and you know get exercise, and that's not really like something you find every day. But yeah, I definitely think that I've thought about that. It's just not something that my game concept right now is doing. Go
I think
ahead.
there is an exercise game where your heart rate controls the elevation of the player.
Huh. Do you know what it's called at all?
No, I think they're doing sit-ups or something like that to try to get their heart rate up, and as their heart rate gets up, it changes the character locomotion type stuff.
Yeah. Go, you sir.
When you think about these biometrics, do you typically approach them as a game designer? Are you approaching them as inputs that a player would manipulate to have an effect in the game, or are you thinking about them more as something that you an indirect measure, something that you're measuring about the player's state in reaction to things in the game?
You know, I think it could reasonably used either way. In my particular example, I was more using it in the terms of like updating something with the player character, not like taking data about the person. But because I think that would have more legal implications if you're like using this data to like they were talking about HIPAA and stuff. So like, but yeah, I was more just talking about using it in the game to update characteristics. I think though, if you could get the legalese sorted out with being able to collect data, it could provide like a lot of insight into like how players just respond to your games. Like especially if you're using the facial recognition, you could get like if they were like excited about your like an aspect of it and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment with, got a fair amount of time left. This is fascinating to me. I'm not an expert at all. Don't even work on my own games or anything here with my son.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating, I don't know how much of a community this is, but we've got Mike right here with Gravity Drive. I mean, this is what his company does. I don't know if they do it in the gaming space, but they actually analyze psychological behavioral responses to digital experiences. And so I don't know if he would share with you and the group anything that they, not quick on the spot, you haven't talked to him in a year.
For sure, if you have.
If it's a product you can interact with, we can help you. That's the way we say it. But essentially, we look at it as another way to measure the human experience to make it more understandable and basically find predictors to help make it better.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm coming at it too. Is like I want to be able to like make the game more understandable for people and like relatable and have them engage with it more. And I think, like I was saying, you could get a lot of data about people too.
But it also might be, this is maybe a funny thing, but maybe it is, and as a safety feature, a friend of mine years ago, when he was building a computer game, they had a cyclic rate on refresh that actually caused seizures. And people walked by, and then later on they used it as part of their marketing, which is kind of negative, but they said, our game can kill people. And literally gave somebody a seizure when they walked by and they saw it, because the refresh rate was at that perfect frequency.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if you can measure stuff like that too, you can almost elevate to, like, I don't know if that might be a factor one day in how they rate the maturity of a game in terms of what this does to people, like an emotional impact.
Yeah, that's really actually interesting. Like I can't predict the future, obviously, but that would be an interesting theory to see if that comes true. Yes, sir.
I came in a little late, I don't know if it was addressed, but are biometrics being applied and measured by AI interfaces? Whether that be a blockchain or any of the others that are currently out there, do you know of that kind of interaction?
I don't know off the top of my head. AI is not like my specialty area, but I did not address that. No. We were more talking about like using heart rate monitors and like facial recognition SDK. So I guess in that aspect, it's sort of AI with the recognition.
Thank you. I was going to add to that. I was going to say, I would, from a game perspective, I seriously doubt something like that is, but from Apple's standpoint, from like your health monitoring, I'm sure that's being analyzed for, that being looked at for some level.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's out there. I just don't want to comment on it because I don't know, like off the top of my head. Yeah.
So this kind of plays off of his, so would you like slow your game down if the heart rate was over like 150 because that's pretty dangerous to consistently have?
That's a good idea, yeah. Like
So like actually make like the time slow. You could, I don't know if you like thought about that.
I haven't thought about that. These are all like great ideas. That like some of them I've thought of and some of them I haven't, and I think it's impossible to think of everything like right off the bat. It's a very emerging field of research, and I'm very lucky to be here talking about it. But I'm gonna go to him, and then I'm gonna come back to you.
Okay, so back on what he just said, the 150. My girlfriend has it's called tachycardia, so her heart rate is naturally much higher than everybody else's.
Okay.
It sits around 50. Like that's just where her heart rate sits.
Okay.
I'm the exact opposite. I sit around like 40.
Yeah.
So would you have like a warning on your game? It's like if your heart rate is between these values, we're going to change settings for you. Because on a game like that where you have a 150 rating heart rate constantly, it would probably make the game a little negative for you. You had to constantly slow it down. For someone like myself, you would have to constantly speed it up with how
good point as well. In the way I have it coded right now, and granted it's not done yet, but there's like different blocks. So there's like a block for if your heart rate, kind of like what he was saying, if there's like a block of code for if your heart rate is in the normal range, and I think I have it pretty broad, like 45 to 160. It's very broad, but it's still like might go outside those values from what you're saying. And then there's another block for above, and then there's another block for below. So it might be worth like revising it, either revising it or, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so one thing, in a lot of places, monitoring heart rate and using that as an indication of arousal has been around for a long time. Heart rate or GSR, galvanic skin response, which is electrical conductivity, which basically is just measuring how much you're sweating. But it's the same kind of arousal thing. If you're really going to mess around with things that you think are going to increase, decrease, whatever heart rate, you really need to learn a lot about the physiology of human beings and what happens during heart rate and a number of other things. One thing is, heart rate, for the most part, is not voluntarily controllable. Heart rate is an indication of your body's reaction to various kinds of environmental stimuli. It's not like you can go, okay, I think I want my heart rate to go up now. Typically that doesn't work. So there's that aspect. So if you start saying, well, I'm going to put in control factors or limiting factors, well, then you've got the things like, what about the people with extremely high and low? If your heart rate is already extremely high and you choose to play a very scary, jump out of you, stimulating kind of game, it may drive your heart rate to dangerous levels, no matter whether there are controls or feedbacks or anything else.
Yeah, that's
Because you've made those kinds of choices, but that, as a game designer, that's not part of your role.
That's what I was gonna say. Is
Yeah.
like at that point it's that person's choice to have played the game,
So,
right?
so if you're going to tweak the game based on somebody's heart rate, I'm not sure that completely makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm just taking in ideas right now.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these are ideas that I have thought
But
of, and some of them are.
there are minimal kinds of ways that you can control things like heart rate. For example, the old thing, take a deep breath and relax. Taking a deep breath doesn't make you relax, but what it does, you have some voluntary control of your breathing. If you
Yeah, and that's
and you
kind
slow
of
your breathing, your heart rate will go down a little bit. So there are interactions. So the place where I see this as being really valuable is twofold. One is actually recording the data of what's happening to someone in the game to help you redesign the game. Have I made that too scary, or have I made that not scary enough? It's not exciting, it's not interesting enough. You not only have the self-report of people, but you've got this physiological measure that you can use to confirm or accommodate it. And that's being used in all kinds of, including marketing research. So one of my friends, his business is, he will show your commercial to somebody and will record a whole bunch of physiological stuff and will tell you whether people find your commercial interesting and what parts of it you're paying most attention to. Wow.
yeah, and so
And so in terms of using that information to shape your game and to pace your game could be invaluable.
yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I was hinting at back on. I think it was a couple slides before this. The increase in player control over breathing patterns. I think that could be like a side effect of having something like this in the game. Is players it's like a reward and punishment system. Like if you are having the incentive to control your breathing, you might take more deep breaths or something. And that might be healthier for people.
So getting back to your games and what they're trying to do, you can create games that become therapeutic in that they, for example, If they're, let's say it's a VR game and you're actually doing some physical movement, it encourages you to do more movement, which encourages your body to increase your heart rate, which encourages you to spend more time doing the activity so your heart becomes stronger. You know, getting people to actually do aerobic activity sometimes is pretty difficult.
Wheelchair bound people, yeah.
So to be able to use the game itself as the motivation device to do the changes in the physiology become a really positive, good use of it.
That's exactly the mentality behind this.
Yeah. But I think that's where this needs to go more than maybe the more trivial thing of your character gets more power.
Well, that's just an example of like how you could use it, but yes. Go ahead.
So by the way, the game she's referring to are games that move you. We have rehab therapy games. So, and we did have to worry about heart rate increase on one of them, wheelchair bound people. But turns out to be a benefit. What I want to say that we had a paper where we're looking at, basically the premise is difficulty implies stress. So can a designer do a curve? So stress all the time, not good. No stress all the time, not good. You know, durations of stress and rest. So you kind of want that cadence, that flow.
Yeah.
And so I think the mentality is you're thinking of, okay, if it gets this rate, we'll do something. But no, you have targets for different sections, or you have time frames. So you have a game with a lot of random events, and they're constantly like up there, and then it's like, okay, let's 2 minutes of rest, get back at it.
Yeah.
2 minutes of rest, get back at it. So kind of more of that cadence you want of you know, making things enjoyable over a long period of time, a longer window rather than an instantaneous decision might be something to look at.
That's definitely a good point. I appreciate everybody's input here. Like, this is a really good discussion we're having about this. Yes.
Really dumb question, what's BLE?
Bluetooth LE. It's the Bluetooth 4.0.
It's just Bluetooth still. Isn't the LE just low energy? It's still all Bluetooth, same API implementation?
No, because it stands for low energy, but like when you're talking about the most of the difficulty we've had getting Bluetooth LE to work over the traditional Bluetooth is it doesn't have support for serial communication.
Yeah, it doesn't have all the API, but it's still just Bluetooth. It's a basic implementation with missing features. Well, I mean, because I do research on this. I am in the developers where I develop features. I'm not saying you weren't necessarily, I was asking because you have BLE, you didn't specify what it was, but it's still Bluetooth.
Yes,
It just doesn't have all the
It's
features.
Bluetooth 4.0, yeah.
It's not, doesn't have to be, it can also be 5.0.
Okay.
That's why I'm saying it is just the Bluetooth.
Yeah, but it's Bluetooth with different features, which is why it has Bluetooth LE. There's a difference between them.
I consider BLE as a technology.
It is, like, it's just missing some of the higher level features, it's not that easy.
Yeah, I know it's missing the higher level features because I've developed with it. Yes, sir.
I just have a final comment. I don't know you or anything, but you came in here and you brought a provocative topic. And I hope as you walk out here, you understand all the dialogue is because you brought a really, really interesting topic in. And there seems to be, at least in part of the room, a lot of passion here. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing this topic in.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you.
It's crazy emerging, you know, I saw their movement thing out here, which, you know, is crazy. So
Yeah, for sure.
you
I
guys bring the topic.
I think we're almost out of time, guys. So if anybody has more questions, I'd be happy to talk to people like outside, but we actually have to make room for the next speaker. So thank you all for coming.